Now we've taken a look at the pentatonic scale in various different positions. We've looked at 2-note per string scales and 3-note per string scales and some patterns that are very usable as well. What I want to do is keep the same framework of the pentatonic in mind, but I want to make you aware of a few arpeggio options as well that are really useful. So let me just play a couple of positions and then we'll break those down. Here they are. Okay, so that arpeggio section that I just played, there was quite a few bits going on, but I want to basically just kind of break some of those down and then show you how to string the whole lot together. I mean, basically how I'm visualising this is it all kind of started from a string skipping technique that I learnt, and instead of playing arpeggios using sweep picking, like this kind of standard E minor arpeggio, obviously it sounds rubbish, but I could never really do that. But as soon as I kind of found out about, Paul Gilbert and string skipping and all that kind of stuff, my arpeggio playing changed dramatically, and it also became a lot cleaner as well. So instead of being, being subjected to, I could just play. And that kind of opened up a whole new world of being able to play arpeggios, that probably sound sweep picked or whatever. There are players out there that are extremely good sweep pickers that make it sound like they're not actually sweep picking at all. But for me, that technique's always been a little bit awkward. That's not to say I don't do it, but I just prefer being able to sort of use legato hammer-ons, and picking technique is kind of a much better thing for me. So, using that kind of shape, which is basically 15-12 on the high E string, 16-12 on the B, and then 14 on the D. And the reason it's called string skipping is because we're completely leaving out the B string. And that's basically where a lot of my string skipping ideas started. There is a kind of major version of that, which does sound like this. So you're kind of keeping the same root, but you're raising the third. So you can hear an obvious difference between almost sort of like happy and sad, really. But yeah, a combination of those different shapes, and you can come up with like loads of different things. I think one in particular, I'll just play this slow, not up to speed, so you can hear the sort of the arrangement. But there was one exercise in particular that really kind of helped me out, and it sort of went like this. Okay, and what that did was kind of open my eyes up to the different possibilities of being able to play quite nice classical sounding arpeggio sections using this technique that I'd found lent itself really well, to how my hands work. So yeah, I just basically sat there and started to work out different ideas of how to play arpeggios and stuff like that. But how I did that was I was obviously playing in one key or whatever, and I wanted to see how much mileage I could get out of just one key sort of thing. So, there's obvious problems with going down to the low E string, where you've got like a kind of sweep, because if you string skip the top part like this, you've then got 3 more notes to get down to the lower octave, which would kind of imply that you would need to sort of like bar between the 14th fret on the D and the A string. So doing this kind of thing, which kind of feels incredibly awkward, as you could probably tell. It wasn't the most cleanly played thing, but that's probably a good thing for you to hear that, because then you can kind of hear how I've sort of steered my way around that. So kind of being in a different frame of mind to try and make that work for me, I decided that I could actually kind of slide down the G string and actually play the rest of it, but in a slightly different pattern. So then I kind of start moving around the arpeggio like that. Instead of having any awkward sweeps or anything, I would actually try and figure out a way of either sliding into the same notes and then carrying on with my string skip, because from there it kind of lends itself to being able to use hammer-ons and pull-offs and all the rest of it, which kind of keeps the flow of the arpeggios. Because one thing I wasn't really keen on my sweep picking, because it just didn't feel like it was flowing very well, or it sounded pretty sticky and stuck. So the reason why I started doing string skipping and all the rest of it was because I could keep that flow going, and it just lent itself really well to me. But I mean, obviously, looking at that, I mean, the other thing as well, people kind of moan at me because I don't use my little finger that much. Well, I mean, I kind of do, but, essentially the first 3 fingers are the strongest fingers on my hand, and my little finger kind of doesn't really play ball with my 3rd finger, so I've had to kind of get around that as like a physical obstacle. It's not because, I've trained myself with bad technique or anything. I've just decided that I've got quite a big stretch between my 1st and 2nd finger, probably from playing piano when I was younger. I think that's where I've got that from. And then I've just basically moulded that onto the guitar. So whenever I'm kind of doing any big stretches and stuff, I just tend to use those 3 fingers, as it just seems natural to me to do that. So yeah, 12 to 9 on the G, to then play 14 and 10 on the A, and then 12 on the low. He looks a bit awkward, but I mean, trust me, it was awkward for me when I started doing it, but then I got obviously more used to it, and I never go back up that way. That's the thing. So I mean, building on this pattern that I played before, you've got this. So then I kind of move from there to there, back up to there again. So, I'm using this sort of like technique that I got from Vinnie Moore, which was kind of, I don't know, one of the only things I really kind of learnt from his style of playing, because it was the only thing I could do. But there was this sort of almost like 5 sort of feel going on. Kind of rolling sort of thing that he used to do, and it really interested me, like how he could sort of do that. And I think over time I've, like I was saying before, you get one technique and you try and find as many different avenues for that technique as possible, and I think that has really kind of sat very well for me in terms of like playing arpeggios. So I've kind of ended up with this thing. And I kind of ended up just having that rolling effect sort of thing going on. Yeah, it really lent itself to being able to sort of play these arpeggios. So that's kind of why I move around those arpeggios the way I do. But getting back to the point of this is being able to sort of like visualise the pentatonic scale underneath these arpeggios. So I mean, if you look at the first position, E minor pentatonic. You've kind of you've got your first position, then you're in 5th position, then you're kind of using notes from 5th and 1st, if you see what I mean. So you can kind of still see your 5th position there, your 1st position, then your 2nd position and 3rd position, even though you're playing arpeggios instead of the actual 5-note pentatonic scale. So yeah, I mean, that's basically how I kind of used to practice. That would be to sort of like go up one and then come down another. So you'd have. So, you'd have kind of a nice sort of rolling thing in between doing arpeggios and stuff like that. And then you'd end up in sort of like pentatonic territory, where you're actually joining the 1st and 2nd positions together at the end of your arpeggio run. I tend to find myself doing that a lot. But what I'll do is I'll break down the actual arpeggio section that I played, and then I'll show you how to sort of incorporate some of those arpeggio ideas with the more pentatonic approach, which I just demonstrated just then. Okay, so those string skips are basically just the bulk of what we're doing, but all we're doing is just extending that arpeggio up. So again, it's quite an awkward arpeggio up on the 24th fret, which is this. But, kind of being the lazy guitar player that I am, I actually decided that that note is better played on the high E string like that, and then that takes me into the only position that I've ever really been able to sweep pick efficiently, is the actual traditional sort of triad minor and major arpeggios, which everybody I think learns. When it started to get beyond 3 strings, it started to kind of trouble me a little bit. But for some reason, those 2 traditional shapes always seemed more natural than any other kind of sweep picked arpeggios. But instead of doing this, I've ended up coming up with this. So, and then you end up going back on yourself into the original position that it all started from. So hopefully you can start to sort of formulate, or start to see how I've formulated my own ideas with these arpeggios, just to kind of get around the neck. Okay, so that's up on the 24th fret, down to 19, slide down to 15. Then you've got 19, pull off to 15, hammer on 17 on the B, then 16 on the G. So, and then from 16 you slide down to 12 on the G string. Then you're going to play the string skipped arpeggio that we looked at earlier. So that's going to be 14 D, 12 up to 16 on the G, then 12, 15 on the high E string, and then back down. So you've got this so far at a slow tempo. Then after that you've got 12, hammer on to 16, pull off to 12, slide down to 9 on the G. Then pull off from 12 to 9 on the G. Then we've got 14, 10 on the A, and then E on the low E, so the 12th fret. Okay, so you've got this. Okay, then after that we've got 10, hammer on to 14 on the A, hammer on to E, 12th fret on the low E. Then we're going to skip and play 12, 16 on the G, then hammer on 14 on the D. So far we've got this. Okay, actually, there is no 12th fret on the low E string. It's funny, when you slow things down, you kind of you start to either miss notes or add notes. That's another point I want to make actually, is kind of when you start to speed this stuff up, you kind of, a certain amount of muscle memory and motor skills kick in, so you're not actually thinking about each individual note that you're playing. So when you actually come to break down some of this stuff, you've actually got to think, well, what do I actually do there? Because sometimes your fingers will just do something that it's got used to doing over many years of playing this kind of stuff. Anyway, no excuse, I'll play it right again. So basically you do this. So yeah, when you get down to the 12th fret on the low E, then 10 to 14 on the A, skip over the D string, play 12, hammer on to 16 on the G, and then finish on 14 on the D. Then after that, we've got 12 to 16 again on the G, skip over the B string and play 12, 15, 12 on the high E string. Then come back down, play 16 and 12 on the G. Then after that, we're going to basically play 14 on the D again, 12 to 16 on the G. So we've got this. Then we're going to play 15, 17 on the B, 15, 19 on the high E, and then tap 24. Okay? So far we've got this at a slow tempo. Okay, then after you get up to the 24th fret, tap on the high E string, pull off to 19, pull off to 15, slide down to 12. Then we're going to go back up to 15 on the high E, pull off to 12 on the high E. 16 to pull off to 12 on the G, then 14 on the D, and then just go back up as far as the 12th fret on the high E string and then down again. Okay, so the whole sequence slow should sound like this. So by playing that example, hopefully you can see that there are different opportunities open to you for playing arpeggios rather than just all swept or all kind of you know, string skipped or whatever. There's loads of different ways you can sort of do it. That's just my preferred way of playing those sorts of arpeggios. You cover a lot of ground, it keeps it very smooth, and you know, it's definitely a sound that I always try and strive to get, is a nice, smooth, clear sort of tone. Okay, well, this last thing I'm going to show you is basically going to combine, you know, that kind of pentatonic idea with using a little bit of arpeggios and then picking as well, just so you can kind of see how you can mesh these techniques together to make long, you know, kind of licks. Again, I don't really want to, you know, sit here and go, right, this is a lick, and then, you know, you go and do exactly the same sort of thing. The thing to bear in mind is just the concept of how I, you know, approach different techniques and then stick them together to make longer sections, because, you know, there are parts of my songs where they do, you know, end up being like really long runs or this, that and the other, but, you know, generally what they are is just kind of short fragments of different things and then just kind of bolted on to the end, and then it just makes one long continuous thing. And also it makes it easier for me to remember as well, because some of those you know, arpeggio sections and stuff, that they've all got little anchor points, and normally the anchor points are where I've decided I want to change technique or go in a different direction or whatever. And you know, when it comes to actually playing this stuff live, it makes it easier in my mind if I've got different trigger points to sort of go, right, that's the next bit coming up, that's the next bit, and then, you know, obviously your muscles get used to it as well. You don't have to think about it as much. But then, you know, you'll find after time with doing stuff like that, especially with recording or playing live or whatever, that you know, the more your muscle memory builds up in your left hand, you know, funnily enough, the easier it becomes to sort of like improvise. You know, I was saying about the 2 note per string improvisational thing, you know, just on the G string. If you can kind of get that under your belt and a few of these ideas to sort of smoothly move around the neck, then you know, improvisation will become a lot easier. It's kind of a mixture between, you know, technique and having a good musical ear and hearing certain melodies that would be nice to play over certain backing tracks. You know, if you can think of a melody in your head, then play it on guitar, then essentially that is going to see you clear to becoming a good improviser. You know, all of these techniques and stuff basically just bolster that up, and you know, hopefully you can get into any sort of situation and play. I mean, obviously this isn't training you up to become, you know, good at jazz improvisation and stuff like that, but this is definitely more of a rock approach to playing. So anyway, I'm just going to play this next section for you, and then I'll talk you through it. So here it is. Okay, so that performance of that lick was just a combination of playing first and second position pentatonics with a little bit of kind of arpeggio thrown in on the way back up, and then back into the, you know, picking pentatonic again, but slightly different using the upstroke technique. So, you know, it's a good way of being able to see how you can mould these different techniques together. So anyway, I'm going to walk you through this lick, and it's going to start with a downstroke on the 12th fret of the high E string, and then we've got 17, 15, 12, 15 on the B, 12 on the B, so we've got this. Then after that we've got 17, 15, 12 on the B, 14, 12 on the G, so we've got this. Then after that we've got 16, 14, 12 on the G, 14, 12 on the D. Then we've got 17, 14, 12 on the D. Then 14, 12 on the A. Then we've got 17, 14, 12 on the A. And then 15 on the low E. And then that kind of starts the next phase off. So at slow tempo so far we've got this. After that, we're going to be letting off the picking a little bit and letting our left hand do a bit more of the work. Now this is kind of more of the arpeggio style that I was talking about earlier, the sort of Vinnie Moore-esque style kind of rolling, So we're kind of going to be doing that going back up. It sort of sounds more arpeggio-like, but I'm still looking at it as first and second position pentatonic. Whether that's kind of right or wrong, it's still my sort of like mindset of how I look at the guitar. So we're coming back up the guitar this time with a hammer on from 12 to 15 on the low E string. Then you've got 12, 14 on the A, and then hammer on 15 on the low E. So we're kind of going up in groups of 5 really. And then 12, 14 on the A, 12, 16 on the D, then 14 on the A. Then we've got 12, 14 on the D, then 12, 16 on the G, hammer on 14 on the D. So far we've got this. Then moving on, we've got 12 to 16 on the G, 12 up to 17 on the B, and then hammer on 15 on the G. Then to finish off this ascending part, we've got 12 to 17 on the B. Then we've got 12 to 17 on the high E string as well. Actually, no, if we go as far as 12, and then the next section will start on 17. So far we've got this. And then when you put it with the first part at a slow tempo, you should have this. Okay, and then coming down, we're going to start with the upstroke picking this time, and we're going to play 17-12 on the high E string and then 15-12 on the B. Then we're going to play 15-12 high E, 15-12 B, and then 14-12 G. Okay, then after that we've got 15-12 B, 14-12 G, and then 14-12 D. Then just repeat the last 4 notes again, so that's 14-12 G, 14-12 D. And then bend on the 15th fret upper whole step. Okay, so at a slow tempo, the whole thing should sound like this. Okay, talking a little bit about improvisation, these ideas that we've been looking at in this DVD are definitely ideas that I would put into practice, either turning up at a jam or with my band, or writing solos for a solo project or anybody else's solo project, or the band, or any situation where I have to play a guitar solo. There's normally kind of start points where I start and then, figure out if it's going to work, if it doesn't work, especially in a recording setup. Obviously live you can't do that, you have to kind of make up your mind there and then if something's going to work or not, and it'll either pay off or it won't. But that's all part of growing as a musician and building up your your experience by getting up and playing with people. Quite often it's better if you play with people that are better than you, and because then you can see how they act and how they conduct themselves in any of those situations, and then it kind of makes you think about your own playing. The thing is, improvisation is just such a difficult subject to tackle when you're actually specifically sitting there and telling someone, right, this is what you need to do, because I don't think you can tell anybody really what to do. It is really down to the individual and how much they've worked on, say like either technique or, the kind of 2-note solo that I mentioned. All those kind of things can really help you, build up an awareness of what you're doing. And I think it's just playing with people, playing with bands, recording, hearing yourself back, cutting out what you don't like in your playing, keeping what you do like. I mean, that's obviously, important, just as important in my book. I mean, you've got to focus on the things that you really like to hear in your own playing. I think it's a shame really that you do get some people you know, that do play and that play exceptionally well, but they'll do records or they'll do albums or, you know, sessions for people and they never listen to them. You know, I kind of think, well, that's kind of a little bit pointless because, you know, I mean, I'm always trying to write stuff and record and do things that I would actually sit down and listen to and appreciate and think, actually, that's pretty good. You know, it doesn't make me cringe. It doesn't make me think, oh, you know, I could have done that better or whatever. You know, and a way to kind of avoid that, you know, live and improvising and all the rest of it is just to sort of work on these little things that we've been doing. You know, in terms of like taking small fragments of things, working on a few patterns that work for you. You know, it's not always a case of, you know, I'll sit here, teach you, and then go, right, you go off and do that, because, you know, that would kind of be sort of missing the point. What I really want to do is, you know, inspire people to come up with, oh, okay, well, I can see that, you know, he's using this position, he's using that technique. Well, what happens if I play that technique, but I swap it round? Or, you know, instead of playing the pentatonic scale all the way up and all the way down, you string skip, you know, over the pentatonic scale. So, I mean, you might have something like this. You know, so you might kind of skip over, come back, skip over, come back. You know, do any number of things like that. You know, I mean, that's basically what I've done. You know, I've taken, like, you know, all the things that I like about different players, and I've kind of gone, oh, you know, what's that? And then learnt it, and then probably 9 times out of 10 not being able to play it either as well or the same as the other person, but in turn, because I've made mistakes like that, I've actually, you know, come to know what I can actually do in my own playing. But that's the thing, you know, improvisation, you know, I think what it is, the most important thing with improvisation is just to kind of hear a good melody in your head and then try and represent that. Now, I mean, you can do that behind closed doors, you can do it to backing tracks or, you know, any songs that you've written. You know, it really is a case of just sort of sticking with it, practicing, and then, you know, if you feel confident that you can, you know, reproduce a good solo, you know, without worrying about what other people think, and then, you know, start to get out there. But the other thing I will say is that, you know, there's plenty of guitar players that I've met that are kind of, oh no, I can't play in front of people, or I get too embarrassed. The thing is, as much as that's a horrible feeling, you've got to do it. Like, you have to go out and play and mess things up in front of an audience before then you can learn and then go, right, well, I'll never do that again. You know, I've been in loads of different situations where I've turned up to like jam sessions, or I've played something and I've gone, that really didn't work, or, you know, that didn't inspire anybody, and then, you know, people have come up and said, oh, I didn't like what you did there, sort of thing. You know, my stepdad being one of them, ages ago in the middle of a gig, he turned up and he said, mate, what are you doing? That sounds rubbish. So, you know, I suppose you've got to have people like that in your life to sort of tell you that you're not good sometimes, for you to sort of like think, actually, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. I'm going to keep working until I'm you know, happy. And then you can record something, put it up against one of your favourite players, and then just see, like, you know, is there stuff in my playing that sounds like, you know, my favourite guitar player, whoever that may be. But, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of these different techniques and stuff, it's just going to, you know, all it's going to do is give you a really good solid roadmap of what you're going to do. And, you know, all I can do, or any other teacher can do really, is just unlock certain doors to certain techniques. But really, at the end of the day, when it comes down to improvisation, it's purely down to the individual, what they do with that knowledge that they've picked up. And, you know, I think my best advice for people, you know, doing improvisation or trying to get better at it, is to just basically learn your scale shapes, learn all the different positions, practice moving in between them, you know, pay close attention to your vibrato and your bending and tuning and all the rest of it. And, you know, in time, you're going to find that that's going to help you out. And then the best thing you can do is get in a band, play with other musicians. As I said before, you need to get with people that are better than you, so you can see how they conduct themselves. And, you know, and then hopefully you will grow as a musician and become a better player.